Hello everyone, today we are going to be doing a deck tech for Anikthea, Hand of Erebos. Anikthea, or I'm going to call her Annie for the rest of the video, is a 5-mana 4/4 legendary enchantment creature demigod with Menace. Other enchantment creatures you control have Menace, and whenever she enters the battlefield or attacks, exile up to one target non-aura enchantment from your graveyard, make a 3/3 token copy of that card, and it's a zombie. So we're going to be doing some Abzan Enchantment Prison. Here's a disclaimer. This deck list was made prior to the knowledge of whatever the precon has in it, so prices are going to be wrong because some cards are going to be reprinted in the new set, the precon, all that. And if there are like no-brainer cards that go in the deck that aren't in here, it's because they're not out yet and I don't know about them. Anyways, why player? One, she's the first viable Enchantress commander. We just haven't really had one. There's like Mirkul or whatever that bone god's name is. He's not really like an enchantment like commander. He just kind of makes your guys enchantments, so we're not really going to count him. Abzan is the best enchantment color because you have all of the ramp, card draw, and removal from, just green being ramp. You have green and white just being all the enchantresses that draw cards, and then you just have black and white being like the best removal in the game. And she's just straight up a reanimator from the zone. You just play her for 5 mana, you get a 4/4, and you actually get a 3/3 so to go along with it. So again, 5 mana for a 4/4 and a 3/3, that's a good rate. Vulnerabilities. The deck's a little bit slow, so super aggro hurts us. Cards like Krenko making a lot of guys will get us. The deck can be slow without our engines to keep going, so if we miss our enchantresses or whatever, that can hurt us. And grave removal hurts us because we have a good amount of reanimation factors in the deck. Here's the game plan. We don't need her to win. We just don't. She is in this deck used to get back enchantments from the graveyard that have annoying effects rather than use her to really get tokens. We're just going to have really annoying effects. If an opponent gets rid of them, we just get it right back. We're going to win by outvaluing our opponents by drawing a bunch of cards with all of our enchantresses and then punish them with our annoying enchantments. And then our primary win con is going to be using tokens that made from other sources to win, while our enchantments are keeping our opponents slowed down. Let's take a look. So first, we have Calyx. We're using Calyx mainly for, really for his +1 ability. His +1, look at the top 4 cards, reveal an enchantment, put it in your hand, put the rest on the bottom. Great. Again, you just basically get another free enchantment every turn. His -3 is also great, just because we can O-ring a creature or an enchantment until it leaves the battlefield. It's just nice when we can just turn like any of our enchantments into a quick O-ring. So he's removal at 4 mana when he comes in, or he's just straight up get an extra card. His -7's great, but we're not realistically going to cast that. Going into creatures, let's go to Arasta. The Endless Web is a reach 3/5, and whenever an opponent casts an instant or sorcery spell, create a 1/2 green reach spider, which is pretty cool. Because again, you're in a pot of 4, 3 opponents, someone's casting spells. You just get guys when they do it. It's really cool. Arcana Sungrace is an all-star in the deck. Is a 4-mana 3/4 with flying lifelink. Pegasus creatures you control have lifelink, and then whenever another enchantment enters the battlefield under your control, you straight up make a 2/2 flying lifelinker because he's on the field. So that's pretty much the way we're going to win, is getting creature tokens like this. Not really Arastas, but I mean, they're still fine. Just get a bunch of creature tokens. And then Argothian Enchantress. All the enchantresses just say, whenever you cast an enchantment spell, draw a card. Something of that nature. Do something with an enchantment, cast or play, or it enters, draw a card. That's going to keep us very consistent. Calyx, Guided by Faith, is a new card. I think he's really neat. 3 mana 2/2 for a legendary enchantment human druid, which I think it's weird he's a druid, but whatever. When he enters the battlefield or another enchantment enters the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on a creature, and then whenever he or an enchanted creature you control deals combat damage to a player, you may make a token that's a copy of a non-legendary enchantment we control. We only do it once a turn. So the idea with him is, we're really only going to put it on himself because we don't have any other enchantment, like we don't have any auras in the deck that can enchant creatures at least. So the idea is, he comes in, he's 3 mana 3/3 basically, and then whenever we attack, he'll probably swing in for like, on turn 4, he'll probably swing in for like 4 damage, and then we can just get like an extra copy of an enchantment that we have. Really cool. Destiny Spinner, a 2 mana 2/3, kind of great. Creatures and enchantment spells you control can't be countered. That's why we're running it. The bottom ability is a nice little add-on. 4 mana, target land you control becomes an XX elemental with trample and haste until end of turn, where X is the number of enchantments you control. That's kind of cool. If we just need like a big quick attacker, we can just be like, oh yeah, I'll pay like 4 mana, I'll make this land like a 6/6, and then I'll crash on in. It's cool. Doomwake Giant is a 5 mana 4/6 with Constellation. Whenever he or another enchantment enters the battlefield under our control, creatures our opponent's control get -1/-1 until end of turn. So by himself, he is just kind of a baby Massacre Worm. But then like when we go like late game, when we're going to be casting multiple enchantments like every turn, it's like, oh, like we cast 3 enchantments this turn, like all of our opponent's creatures get -3/-3. Like he can get pretty silly pretty quick. Eidolon Blossoms, 4 mana 2/2. Whenever it or another enchantment enters the battlefield, draw a card. Short, sweet, to the point. Jukai Nationalist, 2 mana 2/2. Lifelink, great rate, and enchantments cost 1 less. Sounds good to me. Mesa Enchantress, 3 mana. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, draw a card. Again, a lot of our creatures, they just draw us cards or they're cost reducers. It's pretty much what they're there for. Or they make tokens. Sanctum Weaver, it's just a big mana dork. That's really all it is. It's going to tap, it's going to at least add 1 because it's an enchantment creature. But later game, it's going to be like, oh, tap it, and it's basically Serra Sanctum later. Arguably better Serra Sanctum because it gets any of one color. Satyr Enchanter, cast an enchantment, draw a card. Sounds good. Setessan Champion, whenever another enchantment enters, put a 1/1 counter on it and draw a card. Great. Starfield, did I skip one? Nope. Starfield Mystic, 2 mana 2/2. Enchantment spells cost 1 less, really cool. Whenever an enchantment you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, put a 1/1 counter on them. We got a good amount of enchantment creatures. We're really only running them for the cost reducing part, but just like we have a lot of enchantment creatures, our enchantments are going to go away. It's just how it goes. It'll at least get bigger. Sithis, probably the best Enchantress. Whenever you cast an enchantment spell, gain a life, draw a card. It's 2 mana, really good. And then for doing enchantments, just 3 mana, but you know, whenever you play an enchantment that's old school for cast, you may draw a card. So very cool. And then the final creature is Weaver of Harmony, 2 mana 2/2. Other enchantment creatures you control get +1/+1 just because we have a pretty good, healthy amount of them. But more importantly, we can pay a green and tap it to copy target activated ability or triggered ability from an enchantment source we control. Oh, nope, just an enchantment source. Very cool, not even ours. And then we can choose new copies. The idea with them is, one, he just beefs up all our enchantment creatures, especially like if Annie makes any kind of tokens. They're now 4/4 with Menace. We can pay a green to just basically copy Annie's ability when she comes in or attacks again, so then we can just get 2 of them all at once. Or if we just have like a big scary effect from one of our enchantments, we can just copy it and have a good time. Let's go to sorceries. Eerie Ultimatum is 7 mana to get all permanents from your graveyard to the battlefield. Aside from basic lands, you probably get 1 of each basic, but aside from that, that's how Eerie Ultimatum reads in Commander, because you know they can't have the same name. Extinguish All Hope, 6 mana, destroy all non-enchantment creatures. We got a lot of enchantment creatures, just flat out we do. So the fact that it hits pretty much everyone else's stuff sounds good to us. Idyllic Tutor, we're an enchantment deck, 3 mana, search your deck for an enchantment, put it in your hand. Sounds good to me. And then Nature's Lore and 3 Visits are the exact same card. Search your library for a forest card, put that card on the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. So when we look at these, we're pretty much just going to get our Triumph, and we're going to get our Shocklands. Or if we just need like a quick untapped land and we don't have any Shocklands or whatever, it's just good ramp. Anguished Unmaking, Assassin's Trophy, and Beast Within. We're an Abzan, so we have the best like removal, pretty much the best removal colors. Anguished Unmaking, 3 mana, exile a non-land, we lose 3 life, who cares? We just exiled something forever. Assassin's Trophy, just destroy a permanent, they can have a basic, who cares? It's 2 mana. Beast Within, it's 3 mana, destroy a permanent, they can have a 3/3 beast. I say it all the time, but when you look at cards like Assassin's Trophy and Beast Within, it doesn't matter that they get a land, and it doesn't matter that they get like a 3/3, because whatever you're getting rid of is probably much more important than the land or that 3/3. Heroic Intervention, we're pretty much a token deck. Like that's like we win by having a lot of like token generation from like Arcana Sun's Grace and like some other stuff. Heroic Intervention is going to keep us going steady. If someone tries to nuke, we're safe. If someone tries to kill one of our things, we're safe. It's all good. Mythos of Nethroi, 3 mana. If you pay Abzan for it, you pop a non-land. If you pay just a black and 2, you just destroy a creature. Since we're in Abzan colors, just destroy target non-land permanent for 3 mana at instant speed. Very cool. Rootborn Defenses, 3 mana, populate, creatures you control, gain indestructible. The indestructible part is the same logic as Heroic Intervention, but the populate part is when Anikthea or whatever when she enters the battlefield or attack, we create a token copy of an enchantment in our graveyard. So populate is to populate, create a token that's a copy of a creature token we control. Hey, guess what? Those are our big scary enchantments we want to reanimate anyways. Now we have 2 of them. Source of Plowshares, it's just good removal. It's Fairies Protection. Again, just kind of the same logic of like Heroic Intervention. It's a quick like nope out of a situation. That's pretty much it. Just keeps our board safe and us like undealable. You can't deal with us for a turn. Arcane Signet, Lightning Greaves, Soul Ring. The only 3 artifacts in the deck. Arcane Signet and Soul Ring, they're just good mana rocks. That's pretty much it. Arcane Signet fixes colors and Soul Ring is just a good, net positive source for cheap. Lightning Greaves, it's good. We put it on Annie. Or if we reanimate a creature, like one of our enchantments, it's now a 3/3. Say we don't want to get rid of it, we can just like put the shoes on it, make it protected. Anointed Procession. We have a lot of enchantments. I think we have like 31 enchantments. Basically, if you would make a token, make another one of those tokens. We are an enchantment deck. We are a token deck. It works great. Aura of Silence. 3 mana, artifacts and enchantment spells your opponents cast cost 2 more, just kind of hates on them, and then sacrifice it, destroy target artifact or enchantment. So even if they want to get rid of Aura of Silence, like they target it or whatever, you just sacrifice it in response to whatever and just get rid of something they have. Authority of Consuls is a fantastic Magic card. It absolutely destroys aggro decks. 1 mana enchantment, creatures your opponent control enter the battlefield tapped. Well, your opponents can't be aggressive now. And then whenever a creature enters the battlefield under an opponent's control, gain a life. Just this card, if for those of you that have played with this card in Commander, like if this comes down to like turn 1, it's easily gaining you like upwards of like 20 like life throughout a game. It's so insanely good. And it punishes our opponents just by having their creatures enter tapped. Black Market Connections is an all-star of an enchantment. 3 mana, pick the Sunday special. Make a treasure, lose a life. Draw a card, lose 2 life. Make a 3/2 Changeling Shapeshifter, lose 3 life. You can pick any number of those on your pre-combat main phase. I can guarantee you every time you're going to make a treasure and lose a life, and you'll probably also draw a card and lose 2 life. Just every turn having 1 extra mana and having 1 extra card for a cost of 3 life is nothing. It's so good. Blind Obedience, 2 mana, has Extort. That's kind of cool. Artifacts and creatures your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. Same kind of thing with Authority of the Consuls, but this one hits artifacts as well, and it has Extort, so if you're in a pot of 4 and you cast a spell, you can just be like, oh, well, I'll pay the spell, and then I'll pay 1 extra mana, and then I'll have each of you lose 1 life, and I'll gain 3 life. Just quick little drain. Cunning Rhetoric is a card I really like. 3 mana, whenever an opponent attacks you or a Planeswalker you control, exile the top card of their deck, and then you can play that card. You gotta pay the cost, but you can still pay that using any color mana. I like it because when I've played with it, it kind of de-incentivizes opponents to attack you because you just get to you basically get an extra card when someone attacks you, right? Not that they want to attack you anyway, but even if they do, you get to play cards from their deck, which I hate when people play cards from my deck. And that's a good incentivization to not attack someone. Enchantress Presence, whenever you cast an enchantment spell, draw a card. Short, sweet, to the point, great enchantment. Fertile Ground, I don't have really a lot of mana rocks or ramp in this deck, solely just because of the amount of cards we draw with the enchantresses and the amount of enchantresses we can have. But instead of putting Cultivate your Kodama's Reach, I put Fertile Ground effects. It's an aura, we can't reanimate, who cares? But it's 2 mana, Enchanted Land is tapped for a mana, its controller adds 1 mana of any color to his or her mana pool. I like this because in early game, you just kind of slap it on one of your lands and again, you basically have an extra mana. But late game, if you really don't want this, then you could just be no, say Worn Power Stone or an Arcane Signet. You really don't want to see those late game. Soul Ring's okay sometimes, but you don't want to see those late game. But at least late game with Fertile Ground, you're at least probably drawing a couple cards just from the enchantresses, Enchantress's Presence. So even if you don't need the mana, you still get a benefit from drawing cards. Ghostly Prison, just to make our opponents pay 2 to attack us. Though you probably don't want to do that, so no one's really going to want to attack us. Grasp of Fate enters the battlefield for each opponent. Exile up to 1 target non-land permanent that player controls until it leaves the battlefield. This is a really cool card because it's basically just an O-ring for each of our opponents, and it gets one of their things. And the nice thing about it is it plays interesting politics because if player, A, B, and C each put a scary card, player A is well, I don't want to you know, destroy that artifact because I don't want player B and C to get back their best cards. Player B is like, oh, I don't want A and C to get back their best cards. You know how it goes, right? So it's like, this is usually untouched. Greater Oromancy, other enchantments you control have Shroud. Enchanted creatures you control have Shroud. The enchanted creature part isn't relevant, just 2 mana enchantments, other enchantments you control have Shroud. Very, very good. Growing Rites, 4 mana enchantment at the beginning of your upkeep, populate. So I like the idea of this because if we reanimate a token with Annie, then we just make a copy of it every turn. Like just every turn we make a copy of it. And it's nice because this can come in turn 4 and then Annie can come in turn 5 and then reanimate a thing. And it's nice because even if this goes, you can start, since it is a token creature itself, you can start populating this and like, it's kind of like a Scoot Swarm in a way where it gets bigger and bigger every upkeep. Or you get more and more every upkeep. Hallowed Haunting is an absolute all-star in our deck. 4 mana enchantment, as long as you control 7 or more enchantments, we just will, guys. Creatures you control flying and vigilance. Whenever you cast an enchantment, make a spirit cleric with power toughness equal to the number of spirits you control. So you know, comes in 4 mana, you play an enchantment, you get a 1/1 spirit. Well, now you have 2 2/2s, and now you have 3 3/3s, now you have 4 4/4s, and they're also flying and vigilant, so great. Intangible Virtue, 2 mana. Creature tokens get +1/+1 and have vigilance. We're just straight up a creature token deck and an enchantment deck. That's what we want to see. Karmic Justice is basically a slap in the face to our opponents to say, don't touch my shit. Because it's 3 mana. Whenever a spell or an ability an opponent control destroys a non-creature permanent you control, you may destroy target permanent that player controls. So let's say we have Hallowed Haunting on the field, and one of our opponents like beast within our Hallowed Haunting. We're like, cool, well, Karmic Justice now says we can destroy any of your permanents, so you can hit their lands, you really just get rid of something that they have. Like the best thing they have, you get rid of it. So it's kind of like you mess with me, I mess with you. Marari's Wake, it's 5 mana, creatures you control get +1/+1, and then it doubles your mana. I just like the idea of it. Short, sweet, to the point. Overall, it's just a good enchantment, honestly. No Mercy is 4 mana. Whenever a creature deals damage to you, just not combat damage, just damage to you, destroy it. So we really don't want people bothering us. We just straight up don't. So if we have like our opponent has like pingers, or they have like cards like Niv Mizzets, that's like, oh, it deals a damage to like an opponent, like they're not hurting us because they can't, because the creature will die. So it's a good incentive. It makes people not want to attack us because they'll lose whatever creature they attack with. Oblivion Ring, 3 mana, enters the battlefield, get rid of another target non-land permanent. When it leaves the battlefield, return that exiled card to the battlefield under its owner's control. We basically just get rid of something for a little bit, and then we can reanimate it later. It's just good removal. Oubliette is fantastic removal. Oubliette says, when it enters the battlefield, target creature phases out until Oubliette leaves the battlefield, and then when it phases back in, it's tapped. The cool thing about Oubliette is when you, let's say you O-ring someone's commander, or you killed their commander in any way, right? They just say, duh, well, I'll just put it back in the command zone. And they're right to do so, right? The thing with Oubliette is it phases it out. So they got to get rid of Oubliette before their commander can come back into the game at all, right? The thing I like about Oubliette is there are just some decks that really can't interact with it. If there's like a mono red deck, how is a mono red? Let's say there's like a Torbrand deck, and I like Torbrand, I have one. If someone Oubliette's my Torbrand in mono red, I might as well just scoot because I'm not getting it back. Maybe Chaos Warp is like the only option to get rid of it. There's probably others, but like realistically, you're not getting that. You're not getting your commander back. Painful Quandary is 5 mana. Whenever an opponent casts a spell, they lose 5 life unless they discard a card. It's really cool because your opponents are either discarding their hand a lot and losing card advantage, or they're losing 1/8 of their life total every time they play a spell. It's really cool. And then if they're like kind of like spell slinging, it shuts down spell slinging. It's great. Parallel Lives is the same exact thing as Anointed Procession, but it's green. We're a token deck. We're an enchantment deck. We're going to make a lot of guys. Privileged Position, just to give all of our other permanents hexproof. 5 mana, that's a pretty reasonable rate for it. And also just look at that art. It's so cool, so whimsical. Revenge of the Ravens is a pet card. It might not be right for the deck, but I really like it. It's just 4 mana. Whenever a creature attacks you or a planeswalker you control, that player loses 1 life and you gain 1 life. I like the idea because it shuts down like token decks and aggro decks, because it's like, oh yeah, like a Krenko could like attack you with like 100 goblins, but before damage, they're going to take 100 and you're going to gain 100, right? Not in like a more realistic sense, it's just like there's no one's ever going to attack you with a 1/1 again, and even if they attack you with a 2/2, like the damage is essentially halved. Sigil of the Empty Throne, 5 mana. Whenever you cast an enchantment, just make a 4/4. Sounds good to me. Smothering Tithe. Whenever an opponent draws a card, if they don't pay 2, we get a treasure. It's an annoying tax no one likes to deal with. And there's kind of no bad side. It's either our opponent's draws cost 2 more, or we get more mana for it. Sounds good. Sphere of Safety is a 5 mana enchantment, and at its very worst, its creatures can't attack you or planeswalkers you control unless they pay 1 mana for each creature or X number of enchantments you control. So if you just have Sphere of Safety, it's 1, but we're an enchantment deck, we're probably going to have at least like 10 enchantments on the field at any given time. Probably not true, but about so. So it's like, pay 6 for each creature you want to attack me with. It's like, unless you're in Voltron, you're just straight up not doing that. Sterling Grove, other enchantments you control have Shroud. You can pay 1 to sacrifice Sterling Grove. Search your deck for an enchantment card, put it on top, reveal it. That's it. The cool thing about it is if someone tries to destroy Sterling Grove, you just pay 1 mana and get another enchantment to the top of your deck anyway, so there's really no bad situation. Stony Silence, we have 3 artifacts. Activated abilities of artifacts can't be activated. That means that your opponent's mana rocks no longer work, your opponent's utility artifacts no longer work. It's very cool. Teleportation Circle, it's basically just here to trigger constellation abilities, and it's also nice to be able to trigger Anikthea on the end step if we'd like to. That's pretty much why it's there. The Meat Hook Massacre, it's just like probably one of the best nukes in Commander now. It's like such like a modal nuke. It's just black, X, creatures get -X until end of turn, and then just like even when the nuke's done, just whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses 1 life, and then whenever a creature an opponent control dies, you gain 1 life. So it does like a big kill, but the thing that's nice about it is like opponents are going to kill their creatures if they're like aristocrats or like whatever, they're just like a sack deck, or it doesn't matter, like you just passively, it's just passive income, guys. And then the final enchantment is just Wild Growth. It's just a quick another aura land, just you put it on a land, when that land's tapped, you get an extra green. It's a good turn 1 play, like honestly a good turn 1 play is like literally just like a shock land that has green in it, untapped, Wild Growth on it, and then next turn you have like 3 mana. Going into lands, we have all of the Battle Bond lands, we have all of the Vow or Hunt lands. I don't know if that's what they're called, but I really don't know what they're called, but they're really good. We have all of the Shock lands, we have all of the Check lands, and not just for Miscellaneous Lands Command Tower, because it taps for any of our colors, it's basically an untapped Triumph. Exotic Orchard is pretty much the same thing, and honestly, in more cases, better, just because like the likelihood that our opponents having like a green, white, or black mana like among any of their lands is good. Like if they like play like a Mana Confluence or like really anything that can tap for a mana of any color, like we now have like an untapped like land that taps for anything. Very cool. Field of the Dead, it enters tapped, and whenever another land enters the battlefield, if we control 7 or more lands with different names, we make a 2/2 zombie. We have a lot of token doublers in the deck. We win by having a lot of tokens, so just being able to produce tokens on land is really nice. And we have a good amount of non-basics just because, again, like I just went through like the Battlebound Shock, the Check lands, the Vow and Hunt lands, like that's 12 lands right off the bat, and we don't have that many basics. So you're pretty much always going to get zombies on these. Hall of Heliod's Generosity is really cool, just because we can pay 2 mana on someone's like end step or before we draw, just to put an enchantment card from our graveyard on top of our deck. So it's either we can have our draw for next turn set up by like putting an enchantment on top, or we can just, you know, do it whenever. We just get an enchantment whenever we need it. Death of Triumph, Plains, Swamp, Forest. It's very fetchable. That's with Nature's Lore and, you know, all that. And it has cycling if we draw it 2 later. Reflecting Pool, if we can tap for it, Reflecting Pool can tap for it. Honestly, if we just play Death of Triumph and then Reflecting Pool, like it's basically just an untapped version of Death of Triumph. Reliquary Tower, we draw a lot of cards. We have a lot of Enchantresses. So Reliquary Tower is nice just to have no max hand size. Sandstep Citadel is basically a worse version of the Triumph. It just is what it is, but it still taps for any color. Urborg, just so we can, you know, have swamps. We're an Abzan deck. Really no reason not to. I think black is one of our lowest colors, so just being able to hit for all of it sounds just still good. Just for lands, we have 5 of each. Nothing crazy about it. We're a little bit heavier in green and white, but like we have so many duels, it really doesn't matter too much. Just a little miscellaneous, when I made this deck, cost about $644, but, you know, like I said earlier in the disclaimer, reprints happen, it's not going to be this expensive. And then the average CMC of this deck is like 3.05, so we have 35 lands, we have a little bit of ramp, but we draw so many cards, it really just doesn't matter. So thank you guys for watching. Please like the video, it really helps when you guys like. Subscribe to the channel if you want to see more videos, more decks, I do whatever. And then comment whatever deck you want me to do next, because I like making deck techs, and that's pretty much it. Thank you guys so much, and I'll see you next time.